Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today, although I'm upset about the subject we're going to be speaking about. We're going to be responding to the rant by MSNBC Morning Joe host Joe Scarborough as he attacked American citizens, calling them terrorists. Well, before we get to that, I want to mention as well, if this is the first time that you have been on our channel, we do long-form political commentary. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you, the public, talking to you about the issues of the day, listening to your comments on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and even calls coming in. And you can reach us from around the world. We look forward to seeing you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So let's get to the issue at hand, which is Joe Scarborough this morning, January 27th, having a rant about President Trump, about the D.C. riots, calling American citizens, well, terrorists. In fact, rather than trying to explain what he said, we want to make sure we can give you the full context. So we will play exactly what Joe Scarborough said and what was being put on air at MSNBC. Here it is.
What if Ted Cruz just said after 9/11, you know what? Let's just pretend it's going to go away. Let's just forget about it. 9/11, would Ron Johnson say, let's just forget about it? Yeah, they attacked the Pentagon. Yeah, they attacked. Let's just forget about it. That's what Lindsay wants us to do. He wants us to forget about the fact that people were bludgeoned in the head with an American flag because of Donald Trump. He wants us to forget that a cop was beaten to death. And the reason why the cop killer beat the cop to death was because they were inspired by Donald Trump to do so. Ted Cruz wants us to forget because he led the sedition along with Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz. Forget? Forget? You're out of your mind and you're not a conservative. That's how conservatives do not talk. We don't forget. If you attack our country, we go after you. We jail you. We throw away the key. You come after our capital? And you think, Ron, it's simply vindictive? To see justice for the leader of the insurrection, Marco? You hide behind procedural safeguards. This is a procedure. We can't go after it. It's a procedure. No. Find a constitutional lawyer that supports justice and quote that justice. This is what the Republicans in the Senate want you to forget. This is what Rand Paul wants you to forget. This is what Ted Cruz wants you to forget. This is what Ron Johnson wants you to forget. And I say never forget. Just like I said after 9/11, never forget that the Islamic terrorists came to our country and attacked us. And you know what? I said we needed to call them Islamic terrorists. You know why? Because they were Islamic terrorists. You know what these people are? These are Trump terrorists. Call them by their name. Reverend Al, can I get a witness?
You certainly have a witness, I think.
All right. So, there's a reason why I don't watch mainstream media, whether that's on the channels ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox News. I don't watch the cable channels with MSNBC, CNN, because of this kind of propaganda, these kind of shills. Let me say it again. Yes, Joe Scarborough, you are a propagandist shill for MSNBC. for what you have said, what you have alluded to, what you have implied. That is the work of a propagandist and a shill. You are not a conservative. You are not a conservative Republican, and you do not represent conservative Republicans in the United States. And let me be clear on why I am saying that. Because first of all, no one has forgotten 9/11. Let's be very clear about that. And this is not 9/11. This isn't a terrorist attack on the United States by individuals who have promised and are hell-bent on eliminating America and destroying all Americans, no matter what their political preferences are. That's not what this is. No one has forgotten that, or perhaps you have, because you can't tell the difference between what happened in Washington, D.C., which was a riot. Criminal actions did happen, and the people who perpetrated that should be held responsible. But there's a far cry between that and 9/11, you shill, you propagandist, using emotions, serious emotions of the American people to try and promote your personal political ideology and that of MSNBC. Let's get that clear. But let's get into some of the details here, Mr. Scarborough, because you don't seem to remember the details of what we're talking about. You wanted to go and call out President Trump. Please cite the line where President Trump said to cause this riot. Not what you imply, not what you understand, not what you think and are interpreting through a bias of political ideology, but where did he actually say that? Because he didn't. And no one in the news media has found a statement that actually justifies that. You don't have it. If you did, you'd be publishing it. You don't have it. It isn't real. You may not like President Trump, and that is your personal preference. You may disagree with his policies. That's your choice. But that doesn't turn him into a terrorist, nor does it turn other Americans into terrorists. But let's really get into this, because Mr. Scarborough, we do remember that there were riots throughout all of America throughout the entire summer of 2020. And you had nothing to say about it. In fact, the worst that I can find that you said, and again, I don't watch your channel, I don't watch your program because of the fact you are a biased shill, but the best I could find that the left is upset about is your comments against the riots in Minneapolis and the BLM Antifa riots throughout the summer. You made one statement that I can find about the distorted message. And I want to make sure people understand exactly how biased you are, how much of a shill you are. These are your words.
Everybody kneeling together. And those are symbolic, but a lot of positive advances. But we look at what's happening in Portland, what happened in Seattle this weekend, what happened in Oakland. And you have the breaking of windows at a courthouse, setting fire to federal buildings, firing guns in crowds, committing acts of violence that most Americans, including myself, think is repugnant. Now,
let me stop for a second. So it was repugnant when there were mobs in multiple cities that were causing fires, that were destroying property, that killed people, in fact. But it was just repugnant. It wasn't a crime. It wasn't a terrorist act. It wasn't the worst thing to happen in American soil since 9/11. No, that was merely repugnant. You were upset about the fact that these people committed these crimes. And at the same time, while this was happening, there was, on July, when you made this comment, we know that there was the Chaz in Seattle, where people literally took over the property of U.S. citizens, held them captive in a so-called autonomous zone where they rejected the United States government, the laws, and the Constitution and created their own territory. That is, by definition, treasonous. But you thought it was just merely repugnant. Really? Where is your memory of 9/11? Where is your outrage? You don't seem to have any. But let's hear the rest of what you had to say.
Of course, frightening. Donald Trump's use of federal forces is obviously chilling, and it's frightening. But two things can be true at the same time. And I just wonder whether we're seeing some of the outside agitators that we saw throughout the beginning of the George Floyd protests. And I'm wondering if any of these actions, if you think any of these actions are something that we should just look away from. And
wait a minute, you want to look away from the outside agitators? This is what you say. That it's not really the people involved in Antifa and BLM. No, the riots, don't worry. It was outside agitators. It was a small group of other people. And the left is upset because you said that. But wait a minute. The things that happened in D.C., there were hundreds of thousands of Americans who were upset and were making themselves known through the First Amendment, their peaceful protest. A couple hundred people broke into the Capitol at the same time that the protest was going on. And you're saying that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Americans are terrorists because of the actions of outside agitators. Oh, that's because your political belief, your propaganda is using this to attack someone you didn't like. But let's hear the rest of what you had to say there.
And not be concerned about the escalation.
So we shouldn't be worried about the escalation that we saw happen throughout the summer of 2020 in Portland, Kenosha, Seattle, Austin, Colorado, Rochester, New York City, Atlanta. How many other cities do you want me to go through? There were well over a dozen. In fact, I believe it was over 30 cities, 36 cities. Many of them had people who were killed, like in Dallas. Do you remember David Dorn? How about Jessica Dottie Whitaker? What about those people who died? What about the unnamed man in Minnesota, which I'm going to be getting to in just a moment? You had no words for that. I didn't see that. I can't see your outrage. I looked for this. I searched for your outrage against BLM and Antifa and those riots. There was none to be seen. And please do not forget, yes, there were riots in D.C. Yes, it's our nation's capital. And yes, it was not as severe as the billions upon billions, literally over $2 billion in Minneapolis alone, that was destroying cities, leaving people homeless, destroying businesses, leaving them unemployed, unable to feed their families and themselves. Where was your outrage then? Why were you excusing these riots? Oh, I understand why you did that. Because you were busy taking the line of MSNBC. You know, MSNBC that had this to say on May 30th about the riots in Minneapolis.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not generally speaking unruly, but fires have been started, and there's a crowd that is.
Okay, I want to be clear about that. Okay, this is what MSNBC, the propaganda MSNBC has put out there. Okay, let's be very clear. There is an arson happening right behind the MSNBC reporter. An arson. That wasn't spontaneous. They lit property on fire purposefully. There was a mob of individuals The police were blocked from being able to do anything. The fire department was blocked from doing anything. They destroyed random property. This was called mostly peaceful because the other thousands of people that attended this event didn't cause this. And I didn't hear you, Joe Scarborough, shouting down and saying this was terrorism in America, even though these small group of individuals who have very specific political ideology, looking for very specific laws to be imposed against the American people, you didn't have anything to say about that. No, you towed the line, the propaganda of MSNBC, telling people literally to not believe their lying eyes as they see a arson right behind them. No, that was mostly peaceful. Oh, I see. That was mostly peaceful. And as you said, the fact that we had to have troops in Portland and that there were riots for 120 days. In fact, those riots are still going on today with Joe Biden in office. There are riots by Antifa attacking the Democratic headquarters in Portland now. These riots have not stopped. And I do not hear Joe Scarborough talking about how this is terrorist actions, intimidation and fear through the threat of violence. Where is your outrage, Joe Scarborough? What, you want to ask Al Sharpton because he's black? Guess what? So am I. And Al Sharpton isn't a conservative Republican. I am. And where is your outrage? Where have you been with this? I understand you have to pay your job, but you know what? You're forgetting. Because in all your comments talking about, well, we cannot forget. Let's not forget what caused the DC protest. And there was more than one. Don't forget, there have been multiple protests by conservatives in DC that resulted in no violence, no destruction of property. There have been multiple protests in Washington, D.C., where Antifa and BLM burned down buildings, destroyed property, endangered people's lives. And let's not forget, why are conservatives and Republicans, real conservatives and Republicans, protesting? Why are they upset at this moment? Because 74 million people were terrified, were angered with all of the election irregularities, watching individuals on videotape breaking the law, counting votes by themselves without supervision, and in some cases, reissuing those same votes 3 times over. So, Mr. Scarborough, when you tell me we have to remember, let's remember it all. Let's remember, why are people upset? Because there was an election no one believes was fair, honest, and secure. No matter how many times MSNBC gets on its high horse and tells us it has to be, no matter how many times that the internet overlords say, if you question this, you will be silenced in violation of our First Amendment rights, because you're trying to push a political agenda, propaganda, you shill. But you're not. I want to make sure we're not done with this, because I want to ask you, where is your reporting, MSNBC, Joe Scarborough, talking about the election irregularities and the fact that we are finding out now, months after the fact, that in Virginia there was a rule allowing late ballots, that the rule allowing late ballots missing a postmark was illegal to count, that they were not valid votes. Where is your coverage of that? The very question that people had, is this irregular? The very reason why people have protested, because we are not getting answers from the news media, you shill. We're not getting answers to the question, was this a secure election? Was it a fair election? Because 74 million people have doubts. And instead of addressing those doubts, you shill, you tell them to shut up, to be quiet, and when they complain, that they are terrorists. Now, again, I will not apologize for those who committed the riots. No, they're guilty of a crime. They need to be punished by the law. Just as we should have seen for all of the riots throughout the nation, instead of seeing Kamala Harris bail out these individuals and watch district attorneys throughout the entire country, in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, in Portland, in Seattle, in Washington, D.C., in New York City, in Rochester, where there were no charges filed, because the district attorneys let it go, because it was a mostly peaceful protest. You shill, you propagandist. How dare you say this? Yes, people have a question about this. They have many, many big questions. And by the way, when I say that MSNBC, you're not talking about this, here is the search, and I'm going to refresh it live. The Virginia Circuit Court Judge William Eldridge and the late ballots for Virginia 23 hours ago. There is not one news media agency that is reporting on this. Not MSNBC, not CNN, not NBC, ABC, CBS. Where are you guys? There's no coverage. You're not telling the American people what's going on with their elections, that there were irregularities, there were problems. Let's be honest about that, and let's have an honest count. Or at the very least, tell us why it was not significant enough to be worried about. You won't say that. You won't even address it. Instead, you have said, don't worry about it. It's okay. And then you want to attack some of our senators, United States senators, who represented their constituents, who said there are questions about this election that we should make a challenge because we're not sure. And the people weren't sure. And the people wanted to say, at the very least, make the objection, put it on the record so that we can fix this problem going forward. And you know what, you shill Joe Scarborough? You want to be dishonest with the American people? Oh, how dare they go out, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, how dare they say that there is an objection that their constituents had that they represent. How dare you bring that to the floor of Congress? You know, kind of like Democrats did in 2001, in 2005, in 2017. Saying, hey, we have questions. Our constituents had questions about these elections, and we're going to bring it up, just like Josh Hawley did, just like Ted Cruz did. And then the process went forward, and Americans were at least satisfied. Well, they allowed the process to go forward peacefully. But you're a shill when you say, well, this is different. No, it isn't. It's American people. 74 million American people voted against your guy. They lost, but they voted against your guy. And we have questions about those votes. And we're finding out months later, some of our questions were right. There were illegal actions that happened. That is a fact. You don't want to report it, but it is. So when you tell me, and the rest of America, we need to remember, we are remembering. You aren't remembering. You're telling us to forget, to focus on what you want us to believe. Not the facts, your opinion, your biased political opinion, promoted by your news agency, as you tell us that what we see and what we know as facts are just information we should just ignore. Because arson isn't a big deal. By the way, in that arson, a man died. As reported by CNN, in case you think I'm looking at a biased source, CNN reported that a gentleman died. People were arrested for a homicide. It was a homicide. That someone was killed in that fire that you thought was repugnant. That was your words. this fire, this arson that we watched on national TV that MSNBC told us was mostly peaceful, ignoring the crime that was going on. You ignored the murder that went on. You didn't report with that fervent need to inform the American people. You didn't mention that at the Antifa protest, someone got killed. No. Instead, you want to gloss it over and mention that it was repugnant. Not even a crime, just repugnant. And then you want to turn around and tell the American people, you snide, contemptuous shill, you go and tell the American people that they're terrorists? All of us? No. And let's remember, as a conservative and a Republican, the fact is the rule of law matters. Procedures matter. It is important. It is what keeps America peaceful. It keeps America a nation, united. And that doesn't mean united under the rule of law, the submission to Joe Biden, progressives, and MSNBC's desires. It means united as a nation made up of people who don't always necessarily agree. But if you want to prop yourself up as the hero of the conservative Republican ideology, let me tell you right here and right now, no, you aren't. You are a shill. You are a propagandist for MSNBC. And I understand you personally may be upset, and that's fine. That is your right. But you don't get to call Americans terrorists for that. Yes, you can say the people who rioted in D.C. were criminals. They committed crimes. They committed perhaps a murder. And they should go to trial, and they should go and be punished according to the law for that. No different than those everywhere else in this nation. But it seems that there is a divide here, because shills on the major networks seem to think that if you're for the left, your actions, including murder and arson, well, that's okay. Even if you go to the step of treason and tyranny and taking over American property and rejecting the government and the Constitution, that's okay. That's a peaceful protest. But anything from the right, well, ooh, that's just evil. You know what the true evil is? Comments like yours, that kind of rant, that kind of division of American citizens. You owe America an apology, Joe Scarborough. And you may never see this, but I think you might, or at least some of your people might. And you know what? I dare you to continue to go forward with this farce that you are a independent voice, that you're a Republican or conservative voice, because that's not what you're speaking about. You're talking about destroying America, the American institution. You're trying to pit Americans against each other. I don't know what Constitution you read, but it's not the one the rest of us did. And you need to get off your high horse, no matter how much you get paid, no matter how much publicity you receive. You need to get off that high horse and get back down to the American people and have a conversation, because they don't believe what you believe. To my audience, I would like to say, you may disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. And yes, this was more of a rant than what we normally do on this program, but some things need to be responded to, and they need to be responded to forcefully. I hope you won't hold that against us. Of course, we are always happy to hear your comments, telling us where we were wrong, telling us where we were right. And of course, we look forward to your comments every Sunday on our live stream to let us know what you think about these issues, because we believe in freedom of speech, even when that speech disagrees with us. And of course, if you have found this to be informative and interesting, please do like and share. And most of all, subscribe so that more people are able to see this, to comment on it, and to expand our freedom of speech. We thank you, and we hope you have a very good day.